I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? Real or just illusion, manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Hello. Introducing lasers. Hello.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the sixth branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness, this is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020, and tonight we're digging down deep into the rabbit hole of Atlantis. That's right. There's been so many rumors over the years and so much information and misinformation. We're going to see if we can't sort some of that out and figure out exactly what Atlantis is. That is tonight, November 18th, 2020, on the Dark Wolf's Den Show. But first, today in history. On this day in 1307, William Tell is purportedly to have shot an apple off of his own son's head. I gotta tell you, I don't know who would have been the braver soul, the father for shooting towards his son, or the son for putting the apple up there and trusting his father to begin with like that. Ooh, I don't know about that. I don't even let nobody shoot any apple off my head. How about you guys? Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is today's Today in History. I don't know about letting anybody shoot an arrow towards my head. I don't care what's above it, apple or anything else. I don't know about letting somebody shoot an arrow at my head. What about you guys? I'm sure he was extremely thankful that his father did not miss. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of being thankful, it is November, and we are celebrating Never Nothing November. What are you thankful for? The answer is never nothing. And when we asked, we got another answer this week from our buddy Seth Sullivan. Check it out.
This is Seth Sullivan. I'm thankful for a lot of things. But one of the things that I'm one of the things that I'm most grateful and thankful for is I found a community of like-minded people that think outside the box. And I thank AJ and Jerry for the tremendous shows that they put on weekly. It is not taken for granted. Thank you.
And that is Seth Sullivan, ladies and gentlemen, for our Never Nothing November. We appreciate you listening just as much as you appreciate us doing the shows, Seth. And we really enjoy hanging out with you backstage. For you guys that don't know, go and check out the 24/7 Backstage VIP Lounge after the show. We like to hang out back there. If you would like to get heard on Never Nothing November, it's really easy to do, and it's absolutely free. What else can you do in this world that's free, right? Just go over to the riponrabbithole.com. That is RIPON, RABBITHOLE.com. That's right. Over there, you're going to find at the bottom of every single page a great big red button that says record on it. Select that button. You can record up to 30 seconds audio for us here in the studio for us to put on the radio. Ha! Anyways, definitely go over there. Record as a Never Nothing November message. Just let us know who you are and what you're thankful for, and we'll gladly add it to the selection of Never Nothing Novembers for the rest of the month. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's get on with the show. If you are just tuning in tonight, of course, we are talking about Atlantis. That's right. This is a really interesting topic, you know. I like treasure hunting. Like, I like to get the metal detector out and go treasure hunting every now and again, and it's something that I really enjoy. But there's been a hunt going on for the treasure of treasures for a very, very long time. This treasure, of course, being the island city of Atlantis. But what do we know about Atlantis? In order to go hunting for treasure, we got to know what our clues are, right? So where would we find our clues? Where our original clues come from Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, both he describes what is modern-day Atlantis. And this has been something that both archaeologists, treasure hunters, and amateur enthusiasts like myself all like to take a crack at and try to figure out. So, without any further ado, in Plato's words, ladies and gentlemen, here is the story of Atlantis.
Let me begin by observing, first of all, that 9,000 was the sum of years which had elapsed since the war which was said to have taken place between those who dwelt outside the Pillars of Heracles and all who dwelt within them.
Clue number 1. This story goes back 9,000 years before the retelling of it in Plato's time through the character Critias in Plato's writings. So the story he is telling is already 9,000 years old by the time it's getting told to us in writing.
Of the combatants, on the one side, the city of Athens was reported to have been the leader and to have fought out the war. The combatants, on the other side, were commanded by the kings of Atlantis, which, as I was saying, was an island greater in extent than Libya and Asia, and when afterwards sunk by an earthquake, became an impassable barrier of mud to voyagers sailing from hence to any part of the ocean.
Note here that it doesn't mention a flood, it merely mentions an earthquake that took out the city. One can imagine it probably sank under the sea because of the earthquake, A plus B equals C, but it is to be noted that it only mentions the earthquake here. But Critias goes ahead and gives us a bit more of a backstory to how all of this began and exactly what Atlantis was, and this is where we're going to find a lot of our clues.
I have before remarked in speaking of the allotments of the gods that they distributed the whole earth into portions differing in extent, and made for themselves temples and instituted sacrifices.
Of course, most of us already know the lore of the ancient Greek and Roman gods, so we don't have to go over that part anyway.
And Poseidon, receiving for his lot the island of Atlantis, begat children by a mortal woman, and settled them in part of the island, which I will describe.
So this island nation is attributed to being ruled by Poseidon. Now here's where we're going to start getting a lot of our clues back to back. Listen to this.
Looking towards the sea, but in the center of the whole island there was a plain, which is said to have been the fairest of all plains and very fertile.
To be clear here, they mean a plain like a field, a very fertile field, not an aeroplane, just to be clear.
Near the plain again, and also in the center of the island at a distance of about 50 stadia, there was a mountain, not very high, on any side.
And a stadia in Greco-Roman was a use of measurement. Generally speaking, it was the size of an Olympic stadium would be 1 stadia. This was the size of 50, or the distance of 50 Olympic stadia would be the mountain to the middle of the plain.
In this mountain there dwelt one of the earthborn primeval men of that country, whose name was Evanor, and he had a wife named Leucippe, and they had an only daughter who was called Cleito. The maiden had already reached womanhood when her father and mother died. Poseidon fell in love with her and had intercourse with her, and breaking the ground, enclosed the hill in which she dwelt all round, making alternate zones of sea and land, larger and smaller, encircling one another.
So we have a field, we have a mountain, and then we have 3 concentric circles going outwards from the middle of the island. So island, water, land, water, land, water. And in the middle there's supposed to be this dome built up that is supposed to be where the lady lived that Poseidon took a liking to, if you will. So that's where they get the idea of Atlantis being a ringed or a circular island type area.
There were 2 of land and 3 of water, which he turned as with a lathe, each having its circumference equidistant every way from the centre, so that no man could get to the island, for ships and voyages were not as yet.
So it's not like somebody could have sailed there, but even if they did, they would only get to the outer ring and couldn't make it to the inner rings of the island without, physically doing it themselves. They couldn't sail to the inner rings of the island or the middle of the island. Not that they had sails back then, but if they did, still they couldn't have reached it.
He, himself, being a god, found no difficulty in making special arrangements for the centre island, bringing up 2 springs of water from beneath the earth, one of warm water and the other of cold, and making every variety of food to spring up abundantly from the soil.
Now this is actually another important clue. You've got a spring of hot water and a spring of cold water. So you have a hot springs. That means it's near a lava tube of some type. That's actually an important clue.
He also begat and brought up 5 pairs of twin male children, and dividing the island of Atlantis into 10 portions, he gave to the firstborn of the eldest pair his mother's dwelling and the surrounding allotment, which was the largest and best, and made him king over the rest. The others he made princes, and gave them rule over many men and a large territory. And he named them all.
So we've got 10 kids, 1 king, and 9 princes to rule over all the Atlantis area.
The eldest, who was the first king, he named Atlas, and after him the whole island and the ocean were called Atlantic.
A name, of course, that we still use to this day, but that's another clue that tells us the area that we need to search in, the Atlantic Ocean. We don't need to be looking in the Indian or Pacific or anything like that. It tells us that what we're looking for is somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean.
Now, Atlas had a numerous and honourable family, and they retained the kingdom, the eldest son handing it on to his eldest son for many generations. And they had such an amount of wealth as was never before possessed by kings, and is not likely ever to be again.
So we now know that they were a very rich society. After many generations, they had become very, very prosperous, and probably more rich than any society than would ever exist again, end quote.
And they were furnished with everything which they needed, both in the city and the country.
So this is sounding like quite a utopian type of civilization.
For because of the greatness of their empire, many things were brought to them from foreign countries, and the island itself provided most of what was required by them for the uses of life.
And here again we have yet another clue. They were in contact with other civilizations at the time. Foreign traders would come and trade with them on what sounds like a regular basis.
In the first place, they dug out of the earth whatever was to be found there, solid as well as fusile, and that which is now only a name, and was then something more than a name, orichalcum, was dug out of the earth in many parts of the island, being more precious in those days than anything except gold.
Once again, we have yet another clue. Orichalcum literally translates to mountain copper. So it makes one wonder if it was a bronze or a brass or perhaps even a copper that was being dug up. And it reminds me of the Michigan missing copper out of Lake Michigan and out of that area that cannot be accounted for a very long time and then was found to be in European areas. So it's really interesting that once again we have this copper type element showing up, and it could very well have something to do with the lava flow underneath, because we know there was one because there was a hot spring, and in order for a hot spring to exist there has to be water existing above a lava flow. Trust me, I live around a large amount of them myself.
There was an abundance of wood for carpenter's work, and sufficient maintenance for tame and wild animals. Moreover, there were a great number of elephants in the island.
Again, yet another clue, because elephants can only exist in certain climates to the best of my understanding. So that would give us another general area to look in. And they said they did trade, so elephants probably weren't a natural creature on the island, though they could have been. But it sounds more like it was a traded creature that kind of was brought into the society, but it was able to survive. So again, that gives us a general range of the area to look in.
For as there was provision for all other sorts of animals, both those which live in lakes and marshes and rivers, and also for those who live in mountains and on plains, so there was for the animal which is the largest and most voracious of all.
That being, of course, humans. But seriously, this sounds like an extremely utopian society.
Also, whatever fragrant things there are now in the earth, whether roots or herbage or woods or essences which distill from fruit and flower, grew and thrived in that land. Also the fruit which admits of cultivation, both the dry sort, which is given us for nourishment, and any other which we use for food. We call them all by the common name pulse, and the fruits having a hard rind, affording drinks and meats and ointments, and good store of chestnuts and the like, which furnish pleasure and amusement, and are fruits which spoil with keeping.
Once again, this verifies that it is a tropical band of area that we need to look in the Atlantic Ocean, so we can kind of narrow down just a hair right around this, where this would be, which we're talking about somewhere nearer the equator than the poles, let's put it like that.
And the pleasant kinds of dessert with which we console ourselves after dinner when we are tired of eating, all these that sacred island which then beheld the light of the sun brought forth fair and wondrous in infinite abundance.
So to recap, we have an island, then we've got 3 concentric circles: water, land, water, land, water, land, water. And I think I was right. I may have put too many in there, but you guys get the idea. And then we find out that they are actually a utopian society built by the god Poseidon himself, is who it's attributed to. We've got cold springs and hot springs. We've got a very tropical climate. We've got, once again, a very utopian society that were actually traders with outside societies, which is interesting because according to the beginning of the story, there was no ship travel. So perhaps by the time now, it's been long enough that ship travel is starting to exist. But for some degree, they had some kind of outside trade with other civilizations, which I do think is important, and I'll get to that probably later on in the show.
With such blessings, the earth freely furnished them. Meanwhile, they went on constructing their temples and palaces and harbours and docks, and they arranged the whole country in the following manner.
And once again, remember, this is the information coming directly from Plato through his character Critias in, I think it's like 365 BC.
First of all, they bridged over the zones of sea which surrounded the ancient metropolis, making a road to and from the royal palace.
So now all of the concentric circles are connected by this road, or these roads that lead from the middle of the island out to each area. And of course, to the great palace. So there's a palace here. That's another interesting clue.
And at the very beginning they built the palace in the habitation of the god and their ancestors, which they continued to ornament in successive generations, every king surpassing the one who went before him to the utmost of his power, until they made the building a marvel to behold, for size and for beauty.
Not only a palace, but a palace that was continually built onto by every ruler to the point that it was a marvel to behold.
And beginning from the sea, they bored a canal of 300 feet in width and 100 feet in depth and 50 stadia in length, which they carried through to the outermost zone, making a passage from the sea up to this which became a harbour, and leaving an opening sufficient to enable the largest vessels to find ingress.
So clearly they do have ship travel at this point, as they built a harbor for these ships to come and go for trade. And once again, I cannot get over the detail here. The fact that it's describing exactly what the city itself should look like, the entire island should look like, the rings and the land, you know. Then you've got the harbor being built, so now you've got to break into the rings in this exact size. And if you're an archaeologist or an underwater diver and you find something and it happens to match this description, you know you found Atlantis.
Moreover, they divided at the bridges these zones of land which parted the zones of sea, leaving room for a single trireme to pass out of one zone into another. And they covered over the channels as to leave a way underneath for the ships, for the banks were raised considerably above the water.
So the banks of the land would have set considerably high in comparison to the water level. So there's still going to be high banks is the point. So once again, we have another clue of landscape to look for.
Now, the largest of the zones into which a passage was cut from the sea was 3 stadia in breadth, and the zone of land which came next of equal breadth. But the next 2 zones, the one of water, the one of land, were 2 stadia, and the one which surrounded the central island was a stadium only in width. The island in which the palace was situated had a diameter of 5 stadia.
And once again, I'm not going to give a maths lesson, but basically a stadia is the general size of a stadium in Greco-Roman times. And Wikipedia actually has a breakdown if you want to go do the numbers. We're not going to do the numbers here.
All this, including the zones and the bridge, which was the 6th part of a stadium in width, they surrounded by a stone wall on every side, placing towers and gates on the bridges where the sea passed in.
So it sounds like on each concentric circle there was a stone wall. Here is 2 clues right there in one. Number 1, the fact that they've got a wall, or 3 concentric walls it sounds like. But number 2, the fact that these walls are made of stone. So we know we're looking for 3 stone walls around each other. Again, another very important clue.
The stone, which was used in the work, they quarried from underneath the center island and from underneath the zones on the outer as well as the inner side. One kind was white, another black, and a third red.
And yet again, another rapid fire set of clues here. You've got 3 different kinds of stone in these stone walls. A white stone, a black stone, and a red stone. So if we find these stone walls, they have to be consisting of 3 different types of stone. And again, the detail here, the fact that it mentions this much detail is very interesting to me.
And as they quarried, they at the same time hollowed out double docks, having roofs formed out of the native rock. Some of their buildings were simple, but in others they put together different stones, varying the color to please the eye and to be a natural source of delight.
So once again, not only were the stone walls made out of these 3 different colored stones, but also the houses, and pretty much it sounds like everything in the city was made out of these 3 different types of stone. And once again, this could be a clue to where Atlantis could very well be, because you've got 3 different types of stone, and this could be an area that only has these 3 types that would match these color patterns. I'm not sure. I'm not a professional archaeologist, so I couldn't tell you that. But if there's an area that has lava tubes under it, that is in a tropical zone, that has the 3 different types of rocks in the area of it, we might be looking at the area we're looking for.
Which went round the outermost zone they covered with a coating of brass, and the circuit of the next wall they coated with tin, and the third, which encompassed the citadel, flashed with the red light of orichalcum.
So it sounds like each wall had its own distinct look to it. One had tin on it, which glows silver. One was red with orichalcum. The other one was, bronze or brass colored. So each one had its own individual look. So if we find something underwater that has these 3 circles and has these medals on them, we will also know that we're probably in the right spot.
The palaces in the interior of the citadel were constructed on this wise. In the centre was a holy temple dedicated to Cleito and Poseidon, which remained inaccessible and was surrounded by an enclosure of gold. This was the spot where the family of the 10 princes first saw the light, and thither the people annually brought the fruits of the earth in their season from all the 10 portions, to be an offering to each of the 10. Here was Poseidon's own temple, which was a stadium in length and half a stadium in width, and of a proportionate height, having a strange, barbaric appearance.
Again, we have some more clues. We've got details of the location of and the look of a temple, or a series of temples, one of them surrounded entirely in gold and completely inaccessible by people. Now, this is another intriguing fact, again, if we find anything matching it.
All the outside of the temple, with the exception of the pinnacles, they covered with silver, and the pinnacles with gold. In the interior of the temple, the roof was of ivory, curiously wrought everywhere with gold and silver and orichalcum. And all the other parts, the walls and the pillars and floor, they coated with orichalcum.
By the way, orichalcum is not something that can be found today, actually. It's, for whatever reason, non-existent. They think it did exist in Greek and Roman times. They don't think it was part of any myth or anything like that or made up. They do believe that it really did existed. It just doesn't anymore.
In the temple they placed statues of gold. There was the god himself standing in a chariot, the charioteer of 6 winged horses, and such a size that he touched the roof of the building with his head.
And yet another monument in the city.
There were also in the interior of the temple other images which had been dedicated by private persons, and around the temple on the outside were placed statues of gold of all the descendants of the 10 kings and of their wives, and there were many other great offerings of kings and of private persons coming from both the city itself and from the foreign cities over which they held sway.
That is a lot of statues. That sounds like a ton of gold being used. So once again, if we have a way to detect gold underwater or even under the Earth's crust, then there may very well be a way to find Atlantis still.
There was an altar too, which in size and workmanship corresponded to this magnificence, and the palaces, in like manner, answered to the greatness of the kingdom and the glory of the temple.
So we have a lot of clues so far as to what Atlantis actually looked like. And we've got to go ahead and take a network break right here, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be back with the second half and cover more of Cretaeus, written by Plato, and see what other clues and evidence we can find for Atlantis existing. So we'll be right back after these messages for the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Don't you touch that dial.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Sex in the city? Nope. Interview with a vampire? Nope. If you build it, they will come? Febreze? Tweeze in the middle? Wrong again. Depends. Nope. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, my friends. A phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect. You may have heard of it. You may want to not neglect. Unbecoming, awake, and spiritually inclined. So sit back, relax, while I blow your mind. Take the thumb off the cell, stop following the sheep. Down the rabbit hole we go. Are you ready for that leap? The Zapruder film, #JFK. I looked at the footage and I said, what the heck? How come there are 6 people in that dang car? Stretch limo, for me, this was all too bizarre. A glass behind the driver, no way, Jose. I remember before the car, my mind was in total disarray. Trying to make sense of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. Didn't connect with my inner being. A second woman in the car for me was only the first lady. Do you smell what the rock is cooking? All this seemed kinda shady. Berenstein Bears. Nope. Shazam? Sinbad? Not in this reality. Good lord. An awakening. Was it all a revelation? The naysayers and skeptics call it confabulation. They say we misremembered and call us bat crazy. Did you smoke a doob? Maybe that's why it's a little bit hazy. Unless you experience it, you'll never know. But enough of that. On with this Mandela effect flow. Mandela effect in the house. What in the world happened to Ed McMahon? In this reality, Publishers Clearinghouse was not a fan. Never the spokesperson, but we remember it clear as day. McMahon holding that check while the winner yelled out, "Yay!" American Family Publishers, never heard of them until now. This Mandela effect has me raising the people's eyebrow. So many theories on what it could be. Have you ever heard of CERN and the LHC? Luke, I am your father. Nope. Sally Fields? Nope, wrong again. That stands for the Large Hadron Collider. I thought I would mention. You know, the machine that opens up portals into different dimensions? You're probably thinking that this is all science fiction, but you gotta think outside the box and have no restrictions. Alternate realities and parallel dimensions. Okay, I get some of your apprehensions. Could this all be a spiritual evolution? Cause the human race has grown tired of this toxic pollution. Mandela effect in the house. No, I'm not going crazy. Some people, they just don't understand. That's just the way it is. You know? Stay strong, my friends. That's just the way it is. Dolly has no braces? Are you serious? Good lord. Joel Osteen. Oh wait, Joel Osteen. So what the heck happened to the owl? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is definitely the Twilight Zone. This is crazy.
Anyhow, Juanito, 1975. The very best Mandela Effect rap in all of YouTube. Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Are you enjoying Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den show as he searches and howls at Lost Atlantis? If you are, make sure that you thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. Jerry's going to return tomorrow night, Thursday, November 19th, with a look at electric voice phenomenon. I'm really excited about that show, of course. Our October Spooktober that took us through several episodes dealing with this type of phenomenon, electric voice phenomenon, EVP. Tomorrow's topic as Jerry howls at the very best of paranormal radio, the Dark Wolf's Den show. I'll return Friday, November 20th, for a look at rights and wrongs. Do you do things right? Or do you perhaps sometimes do things a little wrong? We're going to figure it out together Friday night, November 20th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Tune in as we discuss right versus wrong. Then Saturday night, are you deficit when it comes to attention? Attention deficit disorder. That's right. We're going to look at focus, how to increase it, how to harness it, how to use it, especially against those that say you may be attention deprived. What? Squirrel? Want to go for a bike ride? Join me Sunday night for 3D Worlds. That's right, Juanito 1975 is going to dive through the rabbit hole of 3D animation, avatars, and 3D worlds as we explore the depth of that rabbit hole. And I got to tell you, it's exciting. We may have a special guest also that's going to join us that night. Of course, Sunday, November 22nd, as we end the weekend out right together. It's going to be a fun weekend. I look forward to spending it with you. If you haven't done so already, please make sure that you make your way on over to the riponrabbithole.com. There you can join our mail list, sign up for our weekly schedule that doesn't come. We don't send it. But you can sign up for it because we're going to start sending it again next weekend. So please, make your way on over if you haven't done so already. Put your email into our subscribe box and join our mail list. They will return next weekend. Speaking of return, we take you back to Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf Sten Show right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. The Ripon Rabbit Hole.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in tonight, we are talking about Atlantis. That's right. In the first half, we heard from Plato's Critias, and we heard a lot of clues about where this place may be. And that is still a highly contested and debatable idea, because there's also the idea of pole shifts, and we know that different natural things happen where the Earth swallows different parts of itself over time. And remember, when this story was being told, it was already said to have been 9,000 years old. So it would have sank 9,000 years before we even heard about it from Plato. And that was a long time ago still yet. We do call them the ancient Greeks, and it was ancient to the ancient Greeks. So where things were then could have changed and swapped and moved since then. Especially considering the time in which it was written. The whole Earth could have been designed a little bit differently. So there's argument over where Atlantis may be. One idea is that Atlantis may be the hidden landmass underneath Antarctica.
Plato stated that his telling of the history of Atlantis was wholly true and based on the findings of Solon, an Athenian lawmaker who is considered the founder of democracy. Solon travelled to Egypt, where he learned about the demise of Atlantis from a highly educated priest called Sontius. It should be noted that the ancient Egyptians were meticulous historians who were obsessive about time accuracies, keeping records in their sacred archives. Plato later recounted Sontius' information that Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Heracles, that is, what is now called the Straits of Gibraltar, which was the boundary of the then known world, and at a distant point in the Atlantic Ocean.
And you remember earlier we spoke that Atlantis had to be in a tropical climate of some type to match its description. So if the Earth had moved location, or the crust had moved location on the Earth, I should say, then it could have moved Atlantis into a lower southern region than where it was, a less tropical area.
In order to correctly interpret this statement, we need to be aware that the limited perspective of the ancient Greeks viewed the Atlantic Ocean as the only ocean in the world. It was not until much later in the 15th and 16th centuries that explorers ventured into and named the Pacific and Indian Oceans and differentiated between the water masses and sailing routes. Therefore, restricting the search for Atlantis to only the Atlantic Ocean has been a historical error.
So earlier I made it a point to note that it's in the Atlantic Ocean. However, if the Greeks called everything Atlantic Ocean, or even the Egyptians called everything the Atlantic Ocean, then it literally could be anywhere, because they're calling the Pacific and Indian Ocean and anything Atlantic Ocean. Well, that changes things, you know. Also, it's got to be in that temporal climate band, right? unless the Earth's crust has moved. So there really is no telling where Atlantis is there?
Findings of the newly developed science of oceanic geography in the 20th century, with subsequent oceanographic studies of the seabed and the formation of continents, have further confirmed this error, because nowhere in the 100 million square kilometres of the Atlantic is there any evidence of either a destroyed continent or the kind of cataclysm which caused it.
And there may very well be a good reason for that, which I'll go over here in a little while.
Accordingly, Sanchez had told Solon that the Mediterranean Sea was only a bay of the real ocean, and that Atlantis was in the middle of the real or world ocean. When we place Antarctica in the centre of a world map, the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans appear as one body of water, where oceanographers called the world ocean encircling it. In Atlantean times, 9,600 years BC, the other continents formed a surrounding continuous outer ring, with the Americas and Afro-Euro-Asia continents joined by a land bridge called Beringia.
Now that's interesting. Where all of the oceans meet, you find Antarctica. Now that could very well be a huge clue.
Number 4. The theory of Earth crust displacement. Many people are aware of the existence of the Earth's tectonic plates, the slow shifting of which results in natural disasters such as earthquakes and tidal waves.
Now this is something that I've touched on a lot this episode, this crust displacement theory. And this is the idea that the Earth's crust is continual movement around the Earth. So there's always something going on. Now, we see earthquakes all the time. These are where the two masses of crust are pushing up against each other, and when they move, you have an earthquake, of course. So what if the movement over large amounts of geological time, which we know this occurs because we move from Pangea into what we're doing right now, well, what if it could have moved Atlantis down to the bottom of the world map opposed to the middle of the world map where it may very well have been at its own time? Remember, that was 11,000 years ago. It was a 9,000-year-old story when it got to Plato, and we've had another 2,000 years plus since Plato. So this is roughly an 11,000-year-old story, which also puts us right around the end of the last ice age, interestingly enough.
Adding to this notion, it has also been theorized that more dramatic and abrupt movements of the Earth's crust have caused major events such as mass extinctions and glaciation patterns. An anthropologist, Charles Hapgood, developed this theory of Earth crust displacement in the early 1950s, and the great physicist Albert Einstein agrees with him that the virtually rigid outer crust of the Earth undergoes, from time to time, extensive displacement, apparently quite suddenly. An Earth crust displacement is a rapid shifting of the entire outer shell of the Earth over its molten inner layers.
Some also believe that a pole shift could cause the crust displacement to quickly increase, at least for a short period, because a displacement of the poles would literally change the magnetic base of the Earth. So I could definitely see things moving around all of a sudden because of new magnetics.
Rather than moving continents in relation to each other, as in the theory of plate tectonics, in an Earth crust displacement, all the continents and the ocean basins that they are connected to move as a single unit over the inner layers of the planet. This shift happens at lightning speed compared with plate tectonics, so that the phenomenon accords with the shocking rapidity and violence of the weather events recorded in Plato's account of the End of Atlantis. The last Earth crust displacement is estimated to have occurred in 9,600 BC, the date that Plato had set for the destruction of Atlantis.
Once again, roughly 11,000 years ago.
Just prior to that event, the part of the Earth's surface that was directly over the North Pole was the ocean-covered part of North America, known as Hudson Bay. During that time, most of the present-day eastern USA was within the Arctic Circle, a polar region covered with an ice sheet.
And of course, today we know that the eastern United States is not in a polar region anymore, even though it can feel like it sometimes, Canada up there, Northeasterners. But seriously, there is a difference in placement of the United States in comparison to 11,000 years ago. And I would imagine most of the world looked a lot different 11,000 years ago. And it only makes one wonder just that much more what if we're on Atlantis, right? What if what we're standing on in America right now, the U.S. continent, is Atlantis? Well, actually, there's a little bit of evidence to suggest that may be the case. If you guys know Eva from Once Upon a Timeline over there, her and I were having a conversation the other night. She's a really good friend of mine, actually. And we were discussing Atlantis and this stuff here, and she gave me an interesting little tidbit of information. So check this out, guys. You know, old maps have North America called Atlantis. The old maps around 1669-ish, and you can find this on Google typing in Atlantis Insula, INSULA map, literally shows Atlantis to be North America or the USA. So that is interesting, and it really goes with what this was saying is perhaps this was or is the location of Atlantis, and the reason we can't find it is, well, we've been here all along. This is, of course, pure speculation as far as us being Atlantis and Atlanteans, because we know we came from Europe, so we wouldn't even be natural Atlanteans. That would be the Native Americans, I would guess. But once again, this is all speculation and pure speculation. But thank you, Eva, for that amazing tidbit of information. It definitely adds to the questions.
Ancient mapping. The Flamath's theory was first inspired by the sighting of an ancient Egyptian map, which accurately depicted the subglacial geography of the Antarctic continent. The map had somehow survived the Crusader Dandelo's hate-filled destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria in the year 1204. Centuries later, in 1665, the map had been found and published by an exemplary cartographic researcher called Athanasius Kircher, who at that time described it as the lost island of Atlantis. The Flamaths argue that this map could not have been drawn by European sailors of that time, not only because the subglacial structures of Antarctica was not visible, but also because sailors were unable to produce accurate maps until the invention of the marine chronometer in the 18th century. In interpreting the map, it needs to be understood that the ancient Egyptians saw the direction of where the headwaters of the sacred Nile connect with the sun as south, so that the map needs to be viewed upside down to accord with the modern depiction of the globe. In doing so, the map represents, in size, shape, scale and position, an ice-free Antarctica, astonishingly revealed almost 3 centuries before human technology was able to determine the true ice-free shape of the continent in 1958.
And I know everybody here has heard of the Perry Reese map. If not, definitely check it out. It is one of the only one, or the only one, that I knew of that showed Antarctica in all of its glory without the ice covering it. I did not know of this Egyptian map that supposedly was printed out or reprinted in 1665, just 4 years before the Atlantis Insula map was published around 1669-ish. I can't help but wonder if it's in reference of the same map. That is really close in timing. But just the same, it's really interesting that this map exists, because I never knew of its existence prior to this episode. So, as a matter of fact, prior to just a couple moments ago, I thought Perry Reese was the only one that had shown Antarctica. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is a new piece of evidence for me, indeed.
The present shape of Antarctica is based on current sea levels, not those of 11,600 years ago, and Atlantis did not sink into the ocean as described in Plato's tale. Instead, As the old ice caps melted, the sea levels rose to cover large parts of the continent. Further distortions in our modern maps are due to the weight of the Antarctic ice sheet. The shadow of Atlantis can still be seen in modern cartography of Antarctica.
So cartographers across the world for generations have agreed that to some degree Atlantis actually existed. And I believe that it did too. Personally, I believe it did because I believe they left their fingerprint all across the world. That's right. I think that when Atlantis fell, when they went under the water, I think that a lot of them escaped. I think a lot of them were able to make it to safety on different continents across the world. And I believe they had an architecture unlike any other. I believe they had an architecture that we see around the world that we cannot explain. You know, we've got a lot of megalithic structures like, I don't know, pyramids. We cannot recreate the pyramid, yet we find pyramids on almost every single continent, and I would even dare say Antarctica. But if the Atlanteans were the original pyramid builders, knew the secrets of building the pyramids, well, then this would make sense why we have them on every continent. I think they were also so advanced they could move these huge boulders in multi-hundred-ton stone with very little to no effort whatsoever. They were extremely advanced for their time. I think they're the ones that were responsible for things like Machu Picchu and these huge megalithic structures that we find all across the world that to this day we cannot explain. I don't know. I know that I want to believe Atlantis existed, right? And why would I waste my time? Why would people waste their time looking for Atlantis, right? Do you think we've just wasted our time this evening looking at all this evidence? Because some believe that Plato was merely expressing an allegory. Well, you know, there's another story in Greco-Roman mythology, the story of the lost city of Troy. And I find this very interesting because for years and years and years, for a good portion of my life, the story was considered nothing more than a myth. It's just a moral tale. You know, it's just something that they made up. It's just a myth. That city didn't really exist. However, there was one archaeologist that went back through the myth and found every clue that he could find. And he went searching for the lost city of Troy, and you know what? I believe about a decade ago, if not a little bit more maybe, he found the lost city of Troy, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. He found the lost city of Troy just using the ancient Greek texts. Now, if that can be done with the lost city of Troy, it is a good possibility that it can still be done with the lost city of Atlantis. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you think Atlantis actually existed? Do you think there was a super technological, rich family of Poseidon, and generation after generation after generation of Poseidon's family lived in this island? And eventually it was taken and swallowed by the sea 11,000 years ago? Or do you think it could just be another washed up story? In the end, ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right. That's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Thursday, November 18, 2020. We appreciate everybody being here, whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat. We appreciate you choosing us to be right there with you. Guys, this show may be over, but we will be back on the airwaves again tomorrow night with an all-new episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. That's right. Tomorrow night we're going to talk about EVP. Something we didn't quite get to during the Halloween episodes, but before we get too far away from those, we need to go ahead and cover this topic. So we got to finish out opening up the weekend with EVP, or Electronic Voice Phenomenon, a term that is so way overused. And then when the den closes on Thursday, don't you worry, that's when the weekend fun really has just begun. That's right. Make sure you come back Friday through Sunday for AJ the Ripon Rabbit and the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show. That's right. This Friday through Sunday, I happen to know the rabbits over there are going to be talking about Friday night rights and wrong. what is right and wrong anymore. Sometimes there's a fine line that starts to define those two terms, isn't there? Make sure you tune in Friday night to find out what AJ's got to say, a magician's point of view on right and wrong. Then on Saturday, attention deficit. Do you suffer from attention deficit disorder? Do you know somebody who does? Definitely tune in. You might be able to learn something you may not have known before. Then on Sunday, a really fun show, guys. Our buddy Juanito 1975, the guy that does the rap and Mandela Effect breakdown song at the break every episode, is going to be on AJ's show on Sunday, and he's going to be talking actually not about Mandela Effect raps, no, but about 3D worlds. That's right. I happen to have an avatar over in the 3D worlds, and he has a blast over there. Does a lot of dancing. Even did a photo shoot with some Transformers. I know it sounds crazy. Maybe Juanito will talk about that on Sunday. And that's going to round out the weekend here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. And if you guys want to continue having fun after the weekend, make sure you go over to my favorite hangout, the RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right. That is RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right. Over there you're going to find the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's where I love to hang out. If you select the 24/7 Backstage Lounge, scroll about halfway down that page, you're going to find the VIP entrance. It is absolutely free. Just have to okay your microphone and camera, and you can turn those off the moment that you get inside. That's right. If you want to go hang out with me right after the show, make sure you come over there and hang out with us in the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. Also, don't forget Never Nothing November, and at the bottom of every single page at the RiponRabbitHole.com, you're going to find the big red button. That's right, it's usually used to give us shout outs here, but for the month of November, I want to hear you shout out to me who you are and what you're thankful for. The answer is never nothing, it's always something, and I want to know what that something is. And we'll put that on the air as part of our special Never Nothing November this month. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and on behalf of Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, Walter House, AJ the Ripon Rabbit, and everybody involved in Ripon Common Sense Radio, we thank you for being here, and remember, until tomorrow night, stay awake, but dare to dream. Bye, everybody. Good night. Oh, yeah.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. a sinner? Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.